This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid state turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's at geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Steve Kahan back on the show. You may remember him when we talked about his book about being a superstar for startups, and he's the former chief marketing officer at Thycotic. And a lot has transpired since then, but we're going to talk about that in a little bit. And Thycotic, I'm a customer of Thycotic, used them for a long time. Great company there. Steve, what's been going on? What's new?
Well, so much, John. First of all, it's great to be back. But since the last time I was on, I now have two grandkids, and Thycotic actually sold for $1.4 billion, which was
Wow.
one of the biggest cybersecurity exits in 2021. And so I've also written a new book called High Velocity Digital Marketing. And actually, as we speak, I'm writing book number 3.
Oh, nice. Any maybe later in the show you can give us a little teaser for what that may be.
For sure.
So with let's talk a little bit about this. I've never taken a company public. I've never been involved in that kind of that level of stress, I would imagine. But what was that process like, and what can maybe executives or engineers or team leads that are working for a company that may be getting ready to go public, what can they be expecting? What is that
Yeah.
like?
Well, first, maybe I'll describe what it's like, right? And so to understand what it was like is you really have to understand what Thycotic was on my very first day.
Mhm.
And on my very first day, we were roughly 5 million in revenue. Thycotic had just received some venture capital from Insight Partners. But it was interesting because revenue was flat for 2 quarters in a row. And from a sales and marketing perspective, needless to say, there was just a lot of good practices that were not in place. And so this company that seemed like it had a bright future and certainly a good product, there was a lot of nervousness around where the company was going to head. And so what I did was I took a look at the situation and built a plan for strategy and execution in which we restored revenue growth the very first quarter. We exceeded our revenue targets every quarter for 5 years running, grew 3.5 times faster than the market, took market share from brutally tough competitors, and literally in 5 years, we went from 5 million in annual revenue to 145 million
Wow.
in annual revenue. We were a leader in Gartner. We had 5,500 customers, 115% net retention rate, which means that customers were happy and buying more. We had over 1 million visitors to our website in the last year, and then ultimately was acquired for 1.4 billion. And so that was sort of the before and the after, I guess, of Thycotic.
Nice. Wow, that's crazy. So what prompted you to write another book?
Well, for me, if it really starts with what I saw in Thycotic, and I work with a number of companies now, and they really are looking to to improve their digital marketing results. And I read a recent study by McKinsey, which said that 83% of CEOs expect their marketing to drive most of their company's revenue. Yet, according to the Harvard Business Review, roughly 80% of CEOs aren't satisfied with the return on their marketing investments.
Mhm.
And what you find is, particularly in tech companies, but really across industries, is that many of the sales and marketing leaders are overwhelmed by revenue expectations they can't meet. And really, what I learned is that the way people buy today has totally changed. And buyers now rely on digital content to make purchase decisions. And think about it in your own lives. I mean, how much time do you spend when you're looking to buy something with sales reps as opposed to doing your own research online? I mean, for example, if you're going to go buy a car, you're probably not super looking forward to going to 10 different car dealerships to work with the reps at those dealerships. Nothing against the reps, they could be really good, but that's just not how people think about it, right? What you would do is you'd start Googling the cars, you'd be reading reviews, you would be doing a lot of your research, you might build your own car, you probably have a really good idea what the price should be, right? And so you probably would know as much about the cars as those sales reps, right? And that's the way people are buying today. And what I've learned is how to digitally market to those buyers in ways in which you can accelerate revenue growth and do so at reasonable cost.
Yeah, and that, I mean, going off your car example, that leads to kind of the rise in the way a lot of cars are purchased these days. That, I purchased a Tesla a few months ago, and that was all online. There was no interaction with a salesperson. There was no, I didn't even test drive it. Honestly, I just went out and bought it.
Yeah. And really that's what the whole book is about, is how do you cost effectively market digitally online? And it really has relation back to Thycotic. I mean, a great
Mhm.
example was when I started there and I met with the founders and the management team. I asked them, so who is it that is your target customer? And they said, well, gee, Steve, we're a cybersecurity company. We sell to the CISOs, chief information security officers. And of course, you should know that. I mean, we're cybersecurity. And so then I started to interview a number of the customers. And what I found was that Thycotic, was not selling to the CISOs at all, right? And so it wasn't that the CISOs weren't involved or aware, but they were very much concerned with policy, making sure their policies were being followed and that their company complied with the regulations that they were subject to. But what I found in talking to the customers was that it was really the IT admins that we were selling to, and it was the IT admins who were focused, who wear multiple hats, who happen to have security as part of what they were concerned about. And so those IT admins wanted and looked for things that were very different than the CISOs. I mean, for example, they wanted super easy, super fast. They wanted a user interface that could be customizable. They didn't want to work with a services organization. They wanted quick time to value. They were never going to read a Gartner report, right? But they would listen to their peers, right? And so if you think about marketing digitally, imagine if I would have spent the company's marketing investment marketing to those CISOs, right? We would have not gotten the results that we would have needed to and would have never scaled the business. And so targeting all of our messaging, targeting all of our content to that ideal target buyer, that IT admin, and in particular, how you do that effectively was really the start to helping the company achieve the type of success that it ultimately had.
Yeah, I feel like that's a moving target and a changing thing, because when you're looking at,
Going back to the Thycotic example, you got an IT admin. I know when we purchased Thycotic, that was one of the things we did is we watched YouTube videos and reviews and tutorials to figure out which product was easiest for our team, which product seems to fit what we were doing and could handle the things that we wanted it to do with, ease of use, easy to deploy, security, always top of mind. And, I would imagine there's some of those avenues are still the same, but now you have other avenues that are coming up, becoming more relevant and popular. Twitter was always extremely popular, and then Facebook, and then Instagram and TikTok, and it's always a changing landscape, it seems like.
Yeah, 100%. And you've got to stay on top of that. Part of that is being close with your customers and
Mhm.
asking them. I mean, and a great example of that is for our organization, we wanted to launch a podcast, right? So we had sort of a security guru who had a lot of interesting things to say, but the last thing I wanted to do was to launch a podcast that from Thycotic that nobody was listening to.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I did, again, going back to knowing that we were focused primarily on those IT admins also responsible for security, was that I did some research to find out, well, gee, where are these IT admins online? And for example, I found that one of the places that they go to get their training is through an organization called Cybrary,
Yep.
and that they had some podcasts as well, and they provided a lot of a very detailed training. And so what I pitched to them was, gee, why don't we partner and launch a cybersecurity podcast? And literally within 30 days, a couple of episodes, we had one of the most listened to podcasts in cybersecurity, simply because we partnered with an organization that had a lot of our buyers that we wanted to focus into following them, and we were able to tap into that. So literally for next to no money, right, we were able to launch a widely listened to podcast. And of course we had good techniques where we had strong sort of calls to action, if you will, or content that we would offer for free that would be of value to those listeners. And then our podcast started to really, in a meaningful way, contribute to our revenue growth.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to go find out where where your customers are. Let's say you're a new business or working somewhere, you're building a new software tool, and you're not exactly sure where your customers are. How do you go about finding that?
Well, first, a lot of it starts with identifying who your customer is. I mean,
Hmm.
in the example that I gave of Thycotic, I mean, here was a company at that time that was 5 million and they didn't know who their customer was, right? And so then it starts with talking to those customers in particular. And there's really a method to the madness in talking to customers to find out where they are and what they're doing. And that is that a lot of organizations, they'll talk to customers, and they'll try and find out where they're hanging out online or their must solve problems, that sort of thing. But what they do is they oftentimes start asking their customers questions that happen to align very much with the products they sell, and they don't get the right information that they need, right? And
Mm.
so what I found is that there's certain categories of questions that you need to be asking your customers, in where it starts to get revealed where they hang out, right? So these are questions around the status quo, around their challenges, what an ideal solution would look like, what the benefits they're looking for, and then the impact of those benefits. And an example of one of those, just to kind of go in a little bit more detail, is that a lot of times the status quo, that organizations don't ask their customers about their current situation or how they conduct business now. And the status quo matters because you often don't lose business to a competitor, you lose business to the status quo, right? And so a lot of times you'll hear buyers say, well, gee, what we have is good enough. We're really not looking for another solution. And that's the status quo. So like in the case of Thycotic, which was in privileged account management, right? I'll just give examples, but people could tailor these questions to their specific situation. So I would ask questions like, describe your current process for privileged access management. What works? What doesn't? What are your operations for privilege access management now? How does your team stay on top of privilege access management and not get overwhelmed by it? What are some of the tools you currently use? What do you like about them? What do you don't like about them? And these are some of the questions that like oftentimes don't get asked, right? And as a result, organizations really don't understand the entire context of their buyer's world, which is so important. And in my book, I go through what the full list of questions that you would ask, and so that people can. I really wanted to write a book where it wasn't theoretical, that someone could actually learn from it very much in a how-to fashion and implement what they need to immediately. And just getting back to the status quo is when you understand that, what it also means is that you can really get great on Google, which is where everybody is online.
Yeah. So when something like that happens and Google is is not your friend anymore, what's your process at that point?
Right. So there are books on Google that you could read 500 pages, or you could be working with an SEO expert and your head could be spinning just getting all of the detail explanations around how you become better. But let me give the listeners just certain things that they could do like immediately.
Yeah.
So for example, we tracked what we called our coveted keywords, and these were the keywords and phrases that we knew that our customers were searching for when they were searching in and around our solution, right? And what we always did was we kept a list of those keywords. And whenever we were creating new content, whether that be website content or any other content that you can imagine, we would have that person who was creating the content meet with our SEO expert, where they would review what should be the keywords in that content. Then at the end of the process, they would meet again to make sure that they were properly included. And then finally, we made sure that all of our content was exposed to the Google scanning, so that we would ultimately get credit for utilizing those keywords, and it helped us move quickly up the rankings. And of course, the content that we created was great, and our partners loved it as well, which created a number of great backlinks to our content, and all of which helped us to punch far above our weight and just do a fabulous job on Google, and quite frankly beat our 100-pound gorilla competitors on many of the keywords. And so being great on Google matters, it counts. And that is one of several examples that someone can actually implement to become great on Google.
So what's the value for this for, let's say, a front-end developer or a website developer that's working for a company that, they have a digital marketing group that's obviously going to be very interested in this, but what value do we have for the developers that are listening?
Well, the developers, I mean, so like, let's just stay with that example that I just gave. A lot of the developers who are working on the website might even be aware of best practices that you should be implementing against to be great on Google, and could be working their tails off trying to make sure that their website itself is technically optimized towards Google. So, but then they don't get the results they want, and then the people ultimately that they're partnering with, whether it be a marketing department or working for, is not getting the response that it wants from Google. And yet they were doing, let's just say, everything right, but the organization wasn't implementing that process that I just gave an example. What I would recommend is that the technical developers of the website who might be frustrated or scratching their heads why their organization is not as good in Google as they should be, even though they feel that they're doing a lot of the best practices, that they talk to their marketing department about actually implementing the process that I just mentioned, which the combination of both will certainly enable an organization to achieve really good results. And let's face it, everybody Googles when they're going to buy. That's just like, it's just how it is, right? And so again, I've got a whole chapter on being great on Google, but that would be one thing that I would recommend the website developers to actually go do with their partners.
Yeah, I think it's also important to think about, like, from your career standpoint, if you're a web developer that has, good experience with SEO and understanding of digital marketing in general, it takes your game to a whole nother level, especially nowadays. You look at how a lot of program managers and projects are ran with Scrum. Sometimes you have the digital marketing team in the stand-ups, and to be able to speak their language and fully understand what's going on, and how that correlates and is translated to the development side of things is really important.
Yeah, 100%. And what it means is that you're really working in partnership, not in silos, right? And just simply that discussion enables you to get to get great and to get great quickly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So what are some other things that we can find in this book?
So in the book, I go through what, for example, would be great content that an organization would develop that would capture the imagination of their target buyers. I talk about website best practices and what great results are. I talk about how to put together campaigns and to effectively market them online, how to incorporate PR as well as events in a high velocity model. I mean, the content matters so much. I mean, just if you look at website developers, one of the things that I would always look at to make sure my organization was on path to the type of revenue growth that we wanted to, was that I was continually building traffic to our website quarter over quarter, month over month, quarter over quarter, but that I was converting that traffic into leads. And think about it, right? So converting traffic into leads means that you're doing something or you're getting someone to do something that probably you and I almost never do, which is put in like their email address, maybe their phone number, their name, etc., on a form, right? I mean, if you're like me, I almost never do that, right? And so it means that that content has to be so good that it compels people to offer up that information. And so an example of that, like if you look at the example of the IT admins, going back to that, right? And so when I was talking to the IT admins, one of the things that I found was that if you asked them how many privileged passwords you had, and these were the passwords across the infrastructure, operating systems, databases, applications, et cetera, that if they got in the hands of bad people, then they'd have the keys to the kingdom. And so if you ask them how many of these privileged passwords they had, like nearly 100% of them had no idea, right? And if you didn't know the passwords that you had, how could you manage and secure them? And so in our paid for product, we had a discovery function. We decided to give away the discovery for free and then target it towards Windows or Unix so we could get even more targeted in terms of our marketing, and then offer that discovery function and then have it produce a beautiful report where people could see these passwords that they have, We would explain the risks associated with that and even what they would need to do if they manually wanted to solve for it, right? And so this was, by understanding our customers, some content that enabled us, this was one of the pieces of content, to get and maintain at least a 5% website visitor to lead conversion rate, which was absolutely essential to us to have the type of growth that we ultimately wanted to have. And then we would take it another step forward where we would give organizations grades, for example, on the risks that they had, like they're in university, A through F, and people really wanted to see what type of grade they had. We would teach our sales and partners to ask the questions rather than being pushy salespeople, to say, well, gee, what type of grade did you get? Where did you do well? Where didn't you do well? Would you be interested in learning how we can help? So to be very consultative. So that's an example, and I explain the importance of content, what would be great content across the various stages of the buyer's journey, how do you come up with ideas for that content, and then how do you, within your organization, get to and maintain a 5% website visitor to lead conversion rate, which is world class.
Yeah. Cool. So you mentioned that you're starting a third book. You give us a little teaser.
Well, this is actually a little change. So, I mean, for me, 30-year startup veteran with expertise in digital marketing, I am actually writing a murder mystery right now with two of James Patterson. He's one of the big thriller writers. Two of his co-authors and I are partnering on a murder mystery right now.
Nice. Fantastic. I think that's awesome. That's a good change of pace.
Yeah, it's just utilizing my brain in ways that I never have and trying to be creative, and it's so much fun. And then working with incredible talents who have written New York Times bestseller books for James Patterson before. It's really an incredible learning experience and just a whole lot of fun.
Awesome. So how can people connect with you online and find out more about what you're doing and pick up a copy of the book?
Yeah, so first, High Velocity Digital Marketing is available wherever you would buy books online, Amazon, for example. And to connect with me, you could connect with me directly at my website, which is beastartupsuperstar.com.
Awesome. And I'll link that up in the show notes as well, so people can get a link to the pre-order for that at geekleader.com. And Steve, good talking to you again. I really appreciate you coming back on the show.
Yeah, it was great to be with you. Thank you for having me, John.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.